Right, so I'd just like to thank everyone for coming into this session this morning. I'd like to introduce Dr. Chris Pocknee from Biolinks Alliance, who's going to be presenting on Glideways in Central Victoria.
All right, thank you for the introduction and thanks everyone for coming in. There's obviously a whole lot of other great talks going on at the same time, so I appreciate the turnout. So my name's Chris Pocknee. I work for an organisation called Biolinks Alliance. We work right across Central Victoria, working with Landcare Networks, Landcare Victoria and other community conservation groups to really scale up the conservation outcomes that we can all achieve across our region. So this is where we work. We're currently made up of a network of 19 member organisations. So as I touched on, these are made up of both Landcare Networks and other community conservation groups. So conservation management networks and friends of groups and things like that. So that's just the kind of breadth of country that we work across. It's a super diverse area across that scope. And one of our kind of flagship programs is what we call Glideways in Central Victoria, and that really does sort of encompass all of this area and all the diversity of habitats that we work across. So why Glideways? I guess at a very high level, Glideways for us is about using gliders, and we also include brush-tailed phascogales in there as umbrella species for connectivity across big landscapes and to connect with communities. I guess in our region, pretty much every area we work in, there's at least one glider species or phascogales in the area, so it's a really effective tool to bring the networks together that we work with. They're a great icon species because they're super cute. People get attached to gliders very easily. And they're a really good icon species for landscape scale connectivity. You know, gliders, they don't come down to the ground to move around. They need connected forests and woodlands and things like that to move around. So for a very fragmented landscape like what we work in Central Victoria, they're a really ideal flagship species for us to work with. We are a partner of the Great Eastern Ranges initiative, which covers basically the whole east coast of the mainland, so right from far north Queensland down to us in Central Victoria. We're sort of the southernmost end of the Great Eastern Ranges. And a bit over a decade ago, they established a Glideways program. And it's been a really impactful initiative, mainly with projects in New South Wales, but being able to expand that into Central Victoria and incorporating the local knowledge that we're able to tap into through our networks has been really effective over the last 7 or 8 years now in our region. So don't worry too much about the detail and the timeline. They're just, I guess, a little display of some of the key milestones for this program, and it's a little bit outdated now already anyway, but we've got 10 community-led conservation groups involved in the initiative and 12 projects under the framework currently. Those projects cover a really big, significant footprint in Victoria. It's a massive amount of land that we are working across. We're obviously not restoring every single inch of that land, but being able to look for ways to connect different parcels within that footprint is having a really strong impact that we're already seeing, and across 10 LGAs as well. So really maximising the reach and the influence that we can have. These guys tend to be the focus of the projects that we work across. Squirrel gliders and southern greater gliders are two really good flagships of this program in Central Victoria. They're both threatened species and very cute, very distinctive, and the general public and the communities, I guess, that we work with don't know a lot about these species too, and it's a really good opportunity for us to increase the level of engagement and education around the threats that face not just these guys, but a whole lot of our native fauna. Phascogale, as I said, that's kind of the one that's not like the other here. They don't glide, but we do include them. They occur right across Central Victoria. They're a threatened species, and they really do face the same sorts of threats that our gliders do. and they have a very similar lifestyle. They need hollows. They will move across land, across ground, unlike the gliders, but they're really vulnerable when they do have to move big distances. So they're a good one to include with our gliders, and again, people get pretty excited when they learn about these guys. They've got a pretty funky life cycle and ecology too, so I'll let you look into that if you're interested. But they also turn up in people's roofs, which is, again, another great opportunity for engagement that we come across when people think they've got, a rat with a funny tail living in their roof or in their pantry or something like that, and we can actually teach them a bit about this really amazing native critter that we've got. And then sugar gliders are obviously not listed as a threatened species, but they do occur right across our region. They're certainly, been declining over the last couple of hundred years as we've lost those old trees, we've lost hollows, we've fragmented the landscape. And so while they're relatively common in some areas, they're a really nice species to talk to people about, and you can actually go out and still, find fairly reliable spots to show people these animals in the wild as well, which is always a great way to get people excited. This is a whole lot of text, don't ignore it, but basically everything we do, every project under the Glideways banner and what Biolinks Alliance does is sort of grounded in what we call a local to landscape model. So our projects really start at the local scale, bringing in local knowledge. We're an organisation that, I guess, coordinates local people, local communities and local conservation groups on the ground to help them meet their priorities and design projects that reach their priorities. But at the end of the day, it's all informed by those local priorities and capabilities on the ground. And then through all that, the next most important section of it, I suppose, is the end result. We're actually out there talking about what we've learned, showing people what we've done, and spreading, what we've learned through whatever means we can to encourage broader uptake. I'm going to just very briefly touch on a few of the projects that I've been involved in the last couple of years through this program. I'm not going to go into great depth on any of them, so if anything tickles your fancy, please do chase me up throughout the next couple of days. But one really cool project which encapsulates a lot of what Glideways is about is this squirrel gliders in Seymour, which is kind of multi-part in a sense, that there was a local resident in Seymour who saw a presentation that we did and got in touch with us and said, I think I've got squirrel gliders on my property. And she was right near the middle of Seymour. There's no records of squirrel gliders around Seymour for over 10 years, but we thought we'll go out, have a look. It's an engagement opportunity, even if she's just got sugar gliders, that's fine. And within about half an hour, we found a squirrel glider. So a threatened species persisting along the Goulburn River frontage, right through the middle of a big town in Seymour. But no one kind of knew that population was there, and the only reason we were able to confirm that was through an invested landholder. So now that we knew this population was in Seymour, about a year later we got asked by the Hughes Creek Catchment Land Care group, and Janet's here in the audience as part of that, and I don't know if Vanessa's here, but she was really key in getting this project up and running. And they were able to get some funding from the state government, I believe, focused on how to get a younger generation involved in land care, basically. And I guess saw this threatened species in an urban environment as a really good opportunity to engage people. And then a co-benefit of that was building on a project that happened about 10 years earlier, where a stretch of road was revegetated and had nest boxes installed in areas that had some good connectivity but lacking hollows and things like that. So throughout the project, we were able to record 8 new squirrel glider records around Seymour, which when there hadn't been a record in town for over 10 years, that was a really big win, with 3 spotlighting nights and a nest box survey. So heaps of potential there for that population to be a lot bigger than what we think it is probably. A really, really cool part of the project was the involvement of Year 11 and 12 woodwork students who we went to the school, gave a presentation about the importance of nest boxes and hollows and the animals that rely on them. And then those students built a bunch of nest boxes, which they then installed in an area which also had a couple of planting days to provide mostly things like wattles that were sort of missing in the understory and are a feed species for these gliders. And then we went and monitored about 30 old nest boxes from that project about 10 years earlier and found squirrel gliders in them, as well as sugar gliders and phascogales. So really cool to see. You know, there's not enough projects around, I guess, where nest boxes that are put up can still be monitored a decade later. So that was really cool, and also, you know, some interesting observations around some of the renovations that some cockies had made to those boxes as well. So it's kind of good to know what's going on that otherwise could get missed. And really amazing community involvement. So over 100 volunteers came out across 3 spotlighting nights and 2 planting days. Really amazing turnout, really tapping into the local community in an area that's probably not, you know, environmentally minded, doesn't jump to the front of your mind when you think about Seymour, if you know the area. So yeah, pretty amazing turnout, and really showing the you know, the importance really of the cut through of the local land care group and also another local community conservation group that was involved in this project. So such a great job of promoting the project, and again, I think the marketability of these guys is really front and centre of that as well. Another project that we've been involved in, we call Kangaroo Creek. So we're restoring and reconnecting habitat for greater gliders adjacent to the Wombat State Forest. So we're doing works on private land there, working along with Malmesbury District Land Care Group, and they're really running with the project now, which is great to see. And thinking, I guess, about thinking beyond just the simple plant trees and put up nest boxes for greater gliders specifically as well, and thinking about this ecosystem, I guess, as a whole, and why are the greater gliders not in some of the areas where we think they should be, and things like that. And one thing that sort of came up was there's some pairs of powerful owls in this area, and there are very, very few possums. So the greater gliders are kind of the key prey item for powerful owls in the area. So just through doing some surveys, working out there's not many possums around, you know, we're able to think a bit differently, put up nest boxes that are designed specifically for some of those possums, smaller gliders as well as greater gliders, and actually build up that whole kind of arboreal food web, I suppose, so that the owls have some other snacks other than just the greater gliders to go for and share the load around. And there's, you know, massive co-benefits with any kind of connectivity work for, there's an amazingly diverse bird community in this area as well, and a whole lot of camera trapping has found massive diversity of lots of things really. So through both spotlighting and camera trap surveys across 13 properties, we've managed to get over 100 greater glider records in the area, so it is a bit of a hotspot for these guys. This includes some surveys in areas where we kind of knew greater gliders were there, but getting a handle on how well they're doing. And there's some other areas where we didn't actually know whether or not they were there, particularly on private land. So yeah, really exciting to expand that knowledge of how greater gliders are using this kind of semi-fragmented landscape. Obviously a whole lot of extra information that we get from camera traps around the different mammals and birds. There was one property where it was, you know, really exciting. We got brush-tailed phascogales turning up on a camera, and it was the only place on this property that they found phascogales was an area where some nest boxes were installed a couple of years prior, and then just nearby on the same property where there were no nest boxes, they got nothing. So just some nice little information that we get out of these sorts of projects that was really led by the local land care group and some really keen landholders, thankfully. Parts of the grants have also included some plant surveys and invertebrate surveys, and a particularly keen volunteer who is part of the land care group who absolutely loves getting out and doing light sheet surveys for invertebrates as well. So he's put in a whole lot of his time to get a lot of this data, an absolute sort of local champion. So really highlighting the importance of those people. I guess being able to support them through Glideways, being able to work with the land care group to design this project strategically and then use their local network to actually connect with the landholders and get this stuff happening has been really rewarding. And we're sort of just working on what the next phase of this project looks like now, so it's going to keep expanding on, hopefully. Last little project I want to introduce has been called the Tale of the Squirrel Glider, and this is being led by Project Platypus in the Northern Grampians region. Aaliyah from Project Platypus, I don't know if she's here, but she's got a presentation part of this conference as well, so go check that out to see what these guys are doing. But they got in touch with us basically around trying to design a landscape scale project focused around a really marketable umbrella species, I suppose, to be able to pitch to bring in some private funding for them to really appeal to some donors that they had in mind. So the squirrel glider really jumped out as an ideal species in this area. There were some recent local records in the area, but really sparse, really uncertain about how they're actually using this landscape because it's incredibly fragmented. There's a few good patches of reserves and things like that, but otherwise they're really relying on vegetated roadsides as far as we could tell. So working out how they're moving through this landscape, what patches they're using, are there hotspots, things like that was really important. And also the fact that there had sort of been a lack of survey effort in the broader landscape for these gliders. People had really focused on the conservation reserves where we knew they were and understanding the population there, which is obviously really important because that's going to be the source of the population in the landscape. But looking beyond that to see where they're moving and guide those future kind of connectivity goals was identified as something that was really missing in this area. Community awareness again came up as, people didn't know they had these in their landscape. People have probably seen them and just gone, oh, it's a sugar glider, because they do look super similar, as you've possibly noticed. Really hard to tell apart, so unless you really know what you're looking for, it's very easy just to see a squirrel glider and think it's a sugar glider. So yeah, we had this really, really detailed project planning phase and lead-in time, which we were quite fortunate to have. We didn't have to fit a project to, I guess, a government or a certain grant funding round. It was quite open-ended, and we were able to design it as Project Platypus and as the local community wanted it to meet their priorities. And they were, quite lucky to be able to go through that process and take that time. Hopefully that map's relatively clear for everyone, but basically there's a whole bunch of the blue stars are records from the Victorian Biodiversity Atlas. So these are records that people and researchers can submit of a species. There are some red dots which are from Rodney van der Rees. He's an ecologist and did a lot of work in this area on squirrel gliders. And then the yellow and green pins are where records have been picked up through this project. So the yellow pins are confirmed squirrel gliders that we've been able to pick up in these new locations, basically up here, and identify some really key areas of roadside habitat, including one right down here, through this project. And the green dots, which don't show up that well, but they're potential squirrel gliders. So that's where we've had individuals where we've been surveying at the wrong time of year when you've got juvenile squirrel gliders and they look just like a sugar glider, so good luck. Some just animals that showed certain features that made it really hard to be certain, or you only got a glimpse of them, something like that. So they kind of highlight the key areas to survey next as well. We got these areas of potential squirrel glider habitat as well. So it is really the first concerted survey effort in about 20 years. So, and this is ongoing. The Project Platypus crew are continually running night walks with the local community as well to hit kind of the new areas of roadside habitat that look good and expand what we know about these squirrel gliders. And it's really interesting where they turn up, and it often meets pretty much what we expect when you drive around these areas in the daytime and you think that could be good, and that's usually where you find them. So it's really interesting to be able to, promising, I guess, that we can identify areas of suitable habitat, but also it rams home kind of the point that what are these populations doing in the long term? They're kind of confined to some good roadside patches, and there's areas that are less good that I'm sure the gliders can move around using those areas, but in the big picture, there's some really some really big challenges for this population going forward, just with this level of fragmentation. And they are, a population that's at a low density in a fragmented landscape is innately at high risk of local extinction. So things like, there's been some big fires in this region lately. If those fires, got across some of those key roadsides or some of the key reserves where the gliders are doing well, then that's, really high risk of local extinction. And some of these records have actually only come about because of the increase in community awareness that has really come from Project Platypus's local on-the-ground work and awareness raising around this project too. So we've had animals that have unfortunately been caught on barbed wire that instead of, that someone has gone, oh, that might be that squirrel glider that I've heard about, and they show someone and we can confirm it, as well as a report from Hall's Gap, which led to some sort of further surveys down there of someone who thought they've seen one. So really promising uptake, I guess, within the community. So revisiting the idea of why we use glideways, I think one thing that comes up all the time is they are an effective flagship group of species. People connect with them, and again, the connectivity aspect is really important. But yeah, for us, just I guess the rewards of being able to bring together the local communities with the latest science and design these projects with local priorities at their heart has been a really rewarding experience, and something that we hope to really keep going over as long as we can. But yeah, thank you, and hopefully I've left some time for questions. We've got a mic. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Hi, Den Barb from Landcare, New South Wales. Great presentation. I was just curious on two things I wanted to ask you. The longevity of your nest boxes, you even said like quite a long time ago that they were built and constructed. You're happy with their longevity and how they're stacking up? And the other question was, in the Grampians example, did the recent wildfires hit that particular site?
So short answer for the second part, no. Those areas thankfully haven't been particularly hit by fire. There were parts of Dadswell's Bridge got hit a bit, and they were areas where we had looked and not found squirrel gliders before the fires. So as far as we know, none of the key areas got hit by the fires. In terms of the nest boxes, yeah, in general, pretty happy with how long they're lasting. So those ones around Seymour that were put up by the Hughes Creek group, 10 or 11 years ago now. Other than the cocky attacks, the boxes have held up really well. And like that site was quite absurd. I've never seen so many boxes that had been attacked by cockatoos in quite a short stretch. So even the ones that were functional had, clear signs of some damage. So other than that, in a lot of the other projects that we're working across where we've put nest boxes up, I guess for our organisation specifically, we've kind of only been probably putting boxes up across the last 4 years or so, and they're all going great. They look as good as they did on day one, which is always nice. But I guess through a lot of the land care groups we work with, we hear really mixed stories, and a lot of that comes down to the materials and your design, which I think in the last few years, those kind of ideal blueprints and designs have become a lot more accessible as well. So I think that's helping.
Hi, Chris. I've got the microphone, sorry guys. My name's Caroline, I'm from the West Gippsland area, and we are working on a Strzelecki alpine biolink. So I'm really interested to know, particularly when you talked about the Kangaroo Creek project, the 13 properties that are engaged. In an ideal world, they'd all be right next door to each other. So how are you going in terms of engaging nearby properties for the purpose of the biolink?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is the million-dollar question, I guess. Unfortunately, there's a couple of clusters within those properties. So we've got one where we've got 3 properties alongside each other, and then there's a big gap, and there's another 3 up here, and that sort of thing. It's a slow process. We've found as well through other projects, you've got to really latch on to those early adopters, and then over time, their neighbours see what's happening and want to come on board as well. And we've another project towards Kyneton where we had a stretch that we wanted to reconnect, and that was only 14 properties, I think. And over the course of about 4 years, we were able to do that, to fill every gap. But it was, 3 landholders jumped on board at the start, and then it was just them talking to their neighbours and gradually got it over the line. So it's finding your local champions and letting them do the selling for you, I think, is the key thing. Because, yeah. Yeah.
Dougal Frederick from near Albury. You mentioned barbed wire before. Are you doing education programs in this regard? Because I've personally, in my area, I've rescued 3 squirrel gliders from barbed wire. It's one of the biggest dangers, I think, for them, and also the issue of I've also had them fried by electricity wires.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, what you're doing in that regard in terms of education.
Yeah, unfortunately not a whole lot in terms of a coordinated campaign. It's very much a case by case. As we're working with individual landholders, we'll have that discussion with them. But yeah, that's about as far as we've got at the moment. But I think we're out of time.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to have to actually pull everyone up there. So obviously there's a lot of great questions still to potentially come. So perhaps catch up with Chris during the lunch break.
Yep.
And take that opportunity. So round of applause, Chris.